Good evening. I'm Lori Hurwitz, the Associate Vice President of Alumni Relations at Tulane, and I'm so happy that you're all here joining us today for the first webinar in the Tulane Alumni Association Virtual Mardi Gras Series. Before we get started, I'd like to offer a few reminders for today's session. All viewers are muted, so we have the opportunity to hear our presenter clearly. But that being said, we definitely want to hear from you as well. So please enter any questions you might have in our Zoom's chat function. This week, we are privileged to have Dr. Kim-Vaz-Deville with us. Dr. Vaz-Deville is an alumna of Newcomb College and the Graduate School and a professor of education at Xavier University of Louisiana. She's a 2018 recipient of a National Endowment for the Humanities Connections Planning Grant for the design of an undergraduate minor in humanities, data science, and digital justice, and author of the book, The Baby Dolls, Breaking the Race and Gender Barriers of the New Orleans Mardi Gras Tradition. Tonight, she is giving us a special look at her latest exhibition with the Louisiana State Museum, Mystery in Motion, which opens this weekend in New Orleans. Dr. Vaz-Deville co-curated the show, which explores the history and diverse spiritual influences of Black masking traditions, including Mardi Gras Indians, baby dolls, and other groups. Dr. Vaz-Deville, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We're all looking forward to hearing more about your incredible work.
Okay. Okay, thanks. Happy Mardi Gras, and as I'm beginning to say these days, happy and holy Mardi Gras. You all are getting in on a little sneak peek of this exhibit that we have been working diligently on. And I will share some snippets from the exhibit and tell you about our thinking and entertain any questions that you might have. So this is an exhibit that explores the spiritual side of Black masking. Usually we think of Mardi Gras as just, a really good time. But I think that with COVID and with our current new creation of house floats, I think that we can see that New Orleanians are, live in the world of creativity. And creativity definitely comes from the spirit. And so I'm hoping that what people will get from this exhibit is a time of contemplation. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. The spiritual sources for Black masking include African, Islamic, Native American, and European systems of belief. And these maskers in this show will sew symbols from these expressions of faith into their garments, their costumes. The Indians call them suits, which when worn become sanctuaries in motion. And the exhibit was inspired by a 2016 Xavier University of Louisiana faculty and staff exploratory trip to Cuba. We were going to start sending our students there, and we went down to see the places that they would be studying and researching and learning and living. Upon visiting Havana's Casa de Africa, a museum of African and Afro-Cuban art and culture, I began to consider how West African spiritual traditions resonated with West African spiritual traditions such as the Ifa religion. I imagine the Black masking Indians as natural forces depicted by the ancient system of the Yoruba people of West Africa. During Mardi Gras, groups parade in a rainbow of colors. The big chief in red, the spy boy in blue, the wild man in green, the second chief in maroon, and so on. I mused on the idea that I had witnessed a public procession of thunder, red for Shango, the waves of the ocean, blue for Yemoja, the forest, green for Ogun, and the wind, which was maroon for Oya. The vivid beauty of the suits and costumes of African-American maskers suggests resonances with other religious traditions, and I sought to make explicit these mystical aspects of Black Carnival. So African-Americans have been creating masks and appropriating Mardi Gras for their own ends since the introduction of Mardi Gras into the Louisiana colony. Their aims could range from enjoying the merriment of the celebration to enjoying the pleasure of subversion of the social order through their masquerade activities. Some used costumes as a ruse to gain entrance into white-only spaces. Under the disguise of satire, some poked fun at the prevailing norms that oppressed them. Under the cover of the predominant religious tradition of French colonialism, Afro-New Orleanians could display identities that were more consistent with their sense of their own importance as people living in a society that devalued them. The imported French Mardi Gras celebrations were appropriated to commemorate the spiritual traditions brought from Africa and those encountered by the native people of the Americas. They created the enslaved people and subsequently African Americans created through the interaction of culture that existed in a great variety in New Orleans, modes of play, and through these forms, they experienced temporary escape from and form and expressed resistance to their captivities. I think it's really important to note at the outset that the people who are in this show consciously incorporate spirituality into their traditions. This is not me or my co-curator, Ron Bechet, or any of the museum staff saying, this is what we think we see. Instead, this is what the people who are creating these new traditions, they're not new, but evolving these new traditions, have said themselves. So it's very important to know that what we are showing and what the maskers have shared are the ways that they live, the ways that they think, the way that they are in spirit. I do have a PowerPoint that I will share with you. And I want to start the share and snippets with Alfred Doucet, Big Chief of the Flaming Arrows. But before I go on, I'll continue to tell you a little bit more about the exhibition and the thinking conceptually behind it. Black people today are using these traditions to resist systemic oppression. Early on, Jim Crow only allowed African Americans so many choices in terms of expressing an alternative identity that showed more of who they are or who they sought to be. But today, this contemporary method of resistance, which is a subject of mystery and motion, is revealed through 10 sections of the exhibit, touching on a variety of faith traditions. And the focus is on cultures and dialogue expressed by the unique costuming and suiting creations and the pageantry. This is an incredible set of sanctified performances that are happening at the intersection of the neighborhood, the street, carnival, and the world of the spirits. African American spirituality developed out of the memory of African religious praise rituals that were embodied, that were oral and performed. African religious traditions emphasize the immediacy of God's help in the life in the here and now, and not primarily in the hereafter. Elaborate oral traditions educated and inspired audiences. The ability to speak what was in one's heart in a dramatic and elegant format crossed the Middle Passage and served as a foundation of Black spiritual communication. In Africa, everyone had a direct connection to the divine force through their ethnic group's many deities. In the lands where the enslaved toiled, they retained their access to holiness through intermediaries like loas and saints. Preachers and their congregations had the ability to be personally filled with the Holy Spirit. The Africans brought with them memories of worship as it was held outdoors and in secret places and in public performances. African divinities emerged from the forest, lived in the sky, controlled the wind and the rivers. They were ritually resurrected from the earth as spirits in masquerade and were worshipped in shrines with heavy foliage or at the feet of tributaries. Religion was connection to the earth. Enslaved Africans had to steal away from the master's eyes into the forest to engage in meaningful prayer. These were called hush harbors. Black Mardi Gras maskers convert streets into hush harbors where ancient and transformed religions are staged in front of their neighbors' eyes. The practice of the Catholic tradition of Visio Divina, or divine seeing, is an ancient form of meditating on images and allowing the holiness of the spirit to reveal its truth to individuals and groups. Whether it's in grand cathedrals, elaborate shrines, small home altars, images of worship create a connection to the divine. Visio Divina makes an opportunity for people to rest, repose, reflect, and receive confidence in answers and encouragement. People the world over have used symbols to express aspects of stories and stories about divinities and establish rituals for worship. What we're hoping in this exhibit is that people can come in and see these maskers and envision them as those magnificent, exquisitely attired spirits that I imagined in Cuba, you know, that one day. So with the two suits that you're looking at right now were created by Alfred Doucet. He is the big chief of the Flaming Arrows. This one particular suit called The Last Supper, where you can see the crucifixion, was made in about 2000. With this suit, he follows century-old Western art tradition depicting the final hours of Jesus. The apron features the Last Supper, Jesus' final meal with his disciples before his crucifixion. The beaded scene captures the spiritual origins of the Holy Communion, the central sacrament of the Christian church. And at the bottom where his knee is actually the Last Supper, and inside the Last Supper are bread and loaves and the hosts, which have come to signify the holy offering of communion. In the lower part of the suit, a soldier pierces the heart of Jesus to confirm his death, and doves represent the Holy Spirit. They're flanking the cross. Doves especially resonate with the masking community in New Orleans. For example, someone whose photograph that you'll see in the exhibit is Big Chief of the Creole Osceolas, Clarence Dalcour. He releases doves on ceremonial occasions and jazz funerals. And at jazz funerals, grand marshals wear streamers adorned with doves. And the white handkerchiefs that second line dancers wave can also be seen as symbolic doves. And there's another suit of the chief that we'll also be showing that he's been so gracious to allow us to exhibit, is Marie Laveau. Marie Laveau, he says, influences everything that he does, including his music, and guides him as he spiritually constructs these suits. And in the Marie Laveau suit, which was made also in the 2000s, he depicts specific locations such as the Iberville housing development and the adjacent St. Louis Cemetery No. 1, which is home to the tomb of Marie Laveau. Marie Laveau's Doucet's spy boil, the wild man and flag man, according to Doucet, wake up the Voodoo queen on Mardi Gras morning in the Voodoo suit. He has placed the graves of Black masking Indians around her to protect her. So he has the spirit of these Mardi Gras Indians around her in this suit to protect Marie Laveau. She reveals her face to him as her soul leaves the grave to make a spirit trail. And that is what he feels protects him on Mardi Gras Day. There's a lot of praying on Mardi Gras Day. I'll just take for example, the Mardi Gras Indians, although the show isn't only about the Mardi Gras Indians, but they sing a hymn, Indian Red, which is a hymn. It's fraught with its own controversies. I won't go into that here, but it is a hymn, and it is sung because people want to safely return at the end of the day. And it's also a chance to wake up the spirits in those roles. So in the hymn Indian Red, everyone who's a member of the tribe will be recognized. It's the same thing that you would find in the spirit in drumming in Santeria or Voodoo, where you're calling out the spirits. And so while I'm not talking about retentions, I'm talking about resonances. I want to share with you just a little bit of him talking about his own food.
Love. Jordan said, thanks for being here.
Thanks for inviting me.
It's a pleasure to have
I
you.
know I have to share this anew.
Here. A lot of people don't realize that Mardi Gras wasn't always integrated as it is now. Let's talk about the history of Mardi Gras Indians in the African American community.
Okay. Well, people been coming together for quite a few years now with the Mardi Gras tradition, and we're trying to keep it alive. We're trying to spread it and keep the real tradition of Mardi Gras. You understand what I mean? Like Mardi Gras is starting to change to a lot of violence. We have kids that's just running wild, and we need to keep the tradition that we had and offer these kids another solution other than what they're dealing with today.
And that's what you're doing with the suit this year.
This new Indian suit that I did today, the Prince of Peace. It's the Last Supper. I have Jesus Christ on the cross, and I have Jesus Christ with his disciples, and I have street messages that I'm trying to get across to these kids, things that maybe somebody never told them. Thou shalt not do this, and thou shalt not do that. So I'm just trying to get a message to put something in these kids' head that maybe somebody else haven't.
And the message this year is anti-crime with this suit.
It is.
Because all the different Mardi Gras suits have messages, have themes.
Right.
And what you're driving home this year is to stop the violence,
That's what I'm
to
talking
teach
about.
kids to look inside themselves, to love who they are.
Love one another.
Love one another.
Yeah.
And when you look at the suits, some of the words on the suit, and we should mention that you did this all by yourself.
Yes.
Every single bead.
Every single bead I sewed myself.
And that's part of the tradition,
Well,
part of the culture.
I'm an Indian chief, and you're not supposed to let other people sew your vision. You understand? Like an artist with a paintbrush. When he starts with his paintbrush, he's got it. When he started, he got to finish it.
Right.
Same thing with a big chief. Now everybody else have people sewing for him, but chief is supposed to sit down and sew his own vision.
And you are actually breaking tradition by revealing your suit to us today, because you're not supposed to do that until Mardi Gras Day. But I like what you told me. You said the message
It's about
is more important.
It's about the message, and you guys is giving me an opportunity to show the world the message, because it's for the whole world, not just for New Orleans.
Thou shalt believe in Jesus. Thou shalt love, rejoice, be kind, pray, work. Thou shalt not hate, not kill, be selfish, want, be lazy, buffoon.
Don't be a buffoon. Making too many babies running around this city. People just got to recognize, you understand, they got to stop. They got to stop making all these babies and bringing all these problems on themselves. I have grandkids, and like I preach to them all the time. You understand? Say, hey, try and wait, get your education. Education is the key. You got to stay in school.
How can people find you Mardi Gras Day? And you're actually willing to teach people how to.
Okay, so one thing that I also want to add is that at the exhibit, there will be several video stations in which you'll be able to hear interviews with those who have things on loan to the exhibit. We also are going to debut a website, and all of those interviews in their entirety will be available via that website. So I think that that's also another component of, fidelity to how people describe themselves, and we're not speaking for them. I'd also like to give you a sneak peek into Voodoo Queen Kalinda Laveau and her 7 mystic sisters. She has started this incredible tradition, and you can see the skirts fanning out. So when we think about the idea of these skirts, think about water, think about the waves that you see, in the ocean. she's voodoo, but from a West African tradition, Yemaya is the one who is on the top of the waves. And these are all similarly informed traditions. And Yemaya would not be at the underneath, you know, in the bottom. She's at the top. And so these river goddesses are always often depicted with these wide skirts of, you know, representing the water. And we who live in New Orleans certainly understand the ferocity of water. So I want to just speak in, you know, with Kalinda's own voice. And she said that in terms of, you know, voodoo is another tradition, spiritual tradition that you can find now. You know, we looked at Chief with the connection to Christianity and the cross and the host and the communion. And now we're turning to voodoo, which is another expression of Black spirituality. And Queen Kalinda says that voodoo is misunderstood. It has come from our African ancestors to Louisiana. The drum rhythms, the dances, the symbology, and vibrant artistic expression are present in every aspect of the city's culture. The rhythms and styles of jazz and second line music come directly from voodoo drumming, she says. Our African ancestors created new forms of music based on instruments available to them. The music is the battery for Mardi Gras parades, Black carnival masking traditions, second line Sundays, and jazz funerals. The beadwork comes directly from African ancestral masquerading traditions in voodoo. This can be seen throughout West Africa and the Caribbean. Creole culture is the heart of her spiritual practice of voodoo, her beadwork, her music, and her values. And so speaking very specifically to, you know, this image, which is representative of what she and the Seven Sisters do when they appear, she says, the important thing to remember is that we don't wear these regalia or African ancestral masquerade, not African, but ancestral masquerades for fun. They have deep spiritual meaning and cultural significance. We do this to honor those who came before us and gave us these traditions. She says, I'm part of a Black masking tradition in the city. I have masked with the Guardians of the Flame Maroon Society and Yellow Pocahontas. We sew all year long in order to create these beaded suits that we wear on Mardi Gras Day. There's only needle and thread, one bead at a time. I sew symbols pertaining to voodoo and Afro-Creole history. I created the Seven Mystic Sisters, she said. We're a group of women dressed in white who bring spirit medicine to the streets on Carnival. We sing, we dance, we conjure, and cleanse the streets. We continue the traditional healing work of the women in voodoo who came before us. Moving to a different spiritual tradition, I found it amazing that in 2018, two men created suits in homage to Shango. And Shango was a king of an ancient African empire. He became deified as rulers tended to do. And so I just want to point out the different, oops, sorry. Sorry about that. All right, so in the Yoruba tradition, Shango was a very powerful warrior, a deified ancestor. And there are two styles within the Black masking Indian tradition. One is a flat style, a visual narrative storytelling style, which is Spy Boy Dao. And there is a 3D, a dimensional geometric pattern of beading, which is symbolized by Chief Shaka with his rams and his mask and his double-headed sword. And so the ram is a special food. The double-headed axe is known, and also the Spy Boy Dao has one. And you can see that the pictorial representation of the flat style has Shango with thunder and lightning. Shango was purported to be a really fierce warrior and was committed to social justice. And so when he deemed something that was inappropriately done, he would rain those thunderbolts down on people. I don't have him as a snippet in this preview of the exhibit, but the man standing next to Shaka, holding the tambourine, oh, I'm learning that my screen isn't on. So let me share. And hope you can see this. So on the right is Shaka Zulu, who has a symbolic suit on, and on the left is the flat storytelling suit of Spy Boy Dao. And I was telling you a little bit about the man standing next to Shaka. And while he's not in the sneak peek, his name is Peter Haroon. He's a spoken word artist. And he also is in the show representing his spirituality from the Nation of Islam. So what I think that you can begin to see is that there is a diversity to spirituality being expressed by these maskers. We are lucky enough to have objects coming from the Quai Branly Jacques Chirac Museum in Paris. And this is one of the loans that they have made to us. It's called the Spirit of Abeta. It's called the Spirit of Triplets, and it's made out of wood. And in Yoruba religion, twins and triplets are considered to be children of Shango, from whom they inherit divine power. Shango, a king in the ancient Yoruba Empire, was transformed into a deity upon his death, and his focus is on justice. And here you have not only the triplets as a tribute to, like as a child of him, but also the double-headed axe. Now, it's not all about, some of our traditional maskers. We also have new maskers coming onto the scene, expressing all different kinds of things. This is called an Ode to Black Women. And this is D'Artagnan Croft, who crocheted every inch of that particular suit. And D'Artagnan wore this costume in 2020, and she wore it for the crew of Bohème. And their theme was the soaring 20s, not the roaring 20s, but the soaring 20s. And it's inner crew, goddess take flight. That was the name of it. So she was responding to that theme. It was designed. Its design was inspired by the 1920s international superstar Josephine Baker and her famous banana skirt, and Oshun, the Yoruba goddess of love and femininity. Josephine Baker had a meteor rise to stardom in France, busting onto the French stage there at just 19 years old. And so I wanted to share that with you, and that's something that you can take a look at up close and personal at the exhibit. This is Eric Burt. Eric is a Mardi Gras Indian. He's a trail chief. He's even a drum chief because with his creativity, he has begun to, I don't know how to get back, but Eric has begun to sorry, I don't want to be off when I'm showing this. Oh, well, you're not going to see it. But anyway, I'll talk to you about Rastafarianism as a political and religious movement that began in Jamaica. And Rastafarianism began in the early 1930s, and they were responding to a legacy of enslavement and colonial domination. And Black Jamaicans envisioned Ethiopia and its emperor, Haile Selassie, who ruled from 1930 to 1974 as fulfillment of biblical prophecies for independent African rule and him as an African divinity. So a central tenet in the repatriation from the West, which Rastafarians call Babylon, to an African ancestral home, which they called Zion, was very much part of what they believe. This Pan-African movement spread globally in part because of the popularity of its signature music, reggae, beginning in the 70s. And Eric Burt is a musician, he is a Rastafarian, and reggae music is also part of the repertoire. And something that is little known is that the emperor visited New Orleans in 1954 as part of an official tour to the United States. He, in spite of it being in the heart of the Jim Crow South, New Orleans pulled out all the stops to show him everything because he could speak French fluently, for one thing. And he also spoke in favor of the Brown versus the Board of Topeka, Kansas decision. He thought that it would raise the profile of the United States, and it was an important step in social justice. While the entire city was fascinated with him, it was his role as spiritual inspiration to Black people around the world that would continue to impact him, would continue his impact for more than 50 years and a new generation. So, so this suit is one that is extremely special in this exhibit because it brings to bear the Rastafarian heritage and spirituality of some of the Black maskers in New Orleans. Again, from the Braun Lee, we have this incredible fez, and this was a gift because the emperor traveled all over the world and gave gifts to foreign dignitaries to solidify good relationships that they were trying to build. And this is this hat is just sumptuous. The color and the fabric resonates with the couture of Black masking outfits. And several Black maskers look to Ethiopian history for their inspiration. And you can learn more about that at the show. So here we go with another aspect of spirituality. And this is the crew captain of the very new crew of Nefertiti. And She is called the Aten captain for the crew. And the inaugural parade of Nefertiti rolled with 200 members and followed the theme, the birth of Nefertiti. There were 14 floats celebrating the beauty and power of Queen Nefertiti with scenes from Egyptian history. The crew's motto is, we serve before we roll, underscoring their commitment to community. And they were dedicated to bringing back a carnival parade to New Orleans East, which had not had one since 1992. So the belief here, and this is a secular crew, but in New Orleans, the sacred and the secular can flow together. The idea that they wanted to embody and hold up the beauty of Nefertiti, who was also deified, and just considered an amazing, amazing goddess. They just really wanted to hold that up and be the sunshine of that kind of beauty and bring that to their community. We have a number of maskers who have taken off with this Egyptian theme. And this suit was made by Tyrone Yancey, the first spy boy of the Yellow Pocahontas. And this suit is inspired by, the pharaohs and the gods and the goddesses, and especially when African Americans are thinking about Egyptians, they're often thinking about the Kushite kings who were commonly referred to as the Black Pharaohs. Yancey's face is completely obscured in this, as you can see. He stands outside the home in this photograph of the late Yellow Pocahontas Big Chief Tootie Montana, which is still occupied by his widow Joyce Montana. For many years, the house continued to serve as a gathering point for the tribe and its followers on Mardi Gras and St. Joseph's Night. And I'll just share one more with you, and this is Bruce Suntai Barnes. Bruce is an amazing musician and the big chief of the Northside Skull and Bones group. And what's important about this is that when Bruce became involved in the Northside Skull and Bones gang, it was he and his mentor. It had really, all of these traditions had really trailed off, partly because the original people who were invented it were old, they were dead, young people want to celebrate in new kinds of ways. But Bruce has come in with his tremendous gifts and revived this tradition. So the Skull and Bones group seemed to have a connection to Haitian traditions, again, going back to the Loa, the guardian of the cemetery, Gede. Because what they do in the Skull and Bones group is to tell everybody to get their lives right. They start off the morning in the cemetery. You see, he has a bone in his hand. They tell you the short distance between life and death and how to make it longer if you live a moral life. That seems to be, their signature message. But what Bruce does now is that when he goes to Africa, he makes pilgrimages to Africa to get inspiration and materials to make headpieces that honor his ancestors. This is a 30-pound wildebeest set of horns on this paper mache mask. And he got that on a trip recently to Ivory Coast. They literally add to the weighty responsibility of alerting the community to get their lives together. Before dawn on Mardi Gras, the Northside Skull and Bone awakens revelers with their signature warning of "You next." I won't play this for you because we don't have the time, but if anybody's interested, I can give you the link. And finally, I just want to end so that we can have time for questions with the spirit of Fayaya. The spirit of Fayaya is actually a spirit. And the reason that this masker's head is covered is because he's a spirit. In Africa, you would not just talk to a spirit because the eyes are not powerful enough to be able to, the human eyes are not powerful enough to be able to withstand seeing something so powerful. So in Africa, the faces are covered. This is Victor Harris, who masked with Tootie Montana for a long time. It came to be that there was an argument, a misunderstanding, and Chief Harris had to leave the tribe. It sent him into an extremely dark period because the tribe had been his family. He had known them his whole life. And so when he found himself an outcast, he had a dark night of the soul. It was terrible. But through his praying and his yearning, he came up with the spirit, God revealed the spirit to him of Fayaya. And with his particular tribe, healing is such a central part of what they're doing. They have their percussion ensemble with them. He says that he cannot function without those drums. Remember, the drums call out the spirit. The tambourines with their little cymbals also are very appealing to spirits and angels. So the idea of music and dance and prayer and chants and healing resonate with those hush harbor practices that the enslaved people relied on. So he was the first one in this Black Mardi Gras tradition. Well, I'll say one of the at the beginning, one of the first, because we also have Big Chief Donald Harrison's a tribute suit to him, and he also looked to Africa for inspiration in the early 60s. But Fayaya really was the first one to have a masking in which raffia and other kinds of things that are used in making African masquerades a part of the tradition of his tribe. And so I wanted to end with him, and also to end with the deeply, deeply spiritual tradition of losing someone in the tradition that you love. Kim Bute was the big queen of the spirit of Fayaya and the Mandingo warriors, basically her whole life. She was related to him, to Big Chief Harris. He wanted her, and so she knew all the traditions. And she was tragically killed by a bullet in August. And this is him paying his respects, being there, journeying, with her to the place in which she doesn't have to suffer. And the last piece of this that I want to share with you, we have a lot of video in the show, a lot of performative video to pull you in. And this was made before, of course, this was made a while ago, and is also in the exhibit. And you can see here the queen next to her has "Peace, Please." So even that year, in their purple attire, they were praying for peace. And I'll just end my presentation with this.
You can't stop spirit. Spirit doesn't have a name, and neither does feeling what its real is.
Okay, so that's a little bit about what the exhibit is offering, and I'm open to questions.
Well, great. That was amazing. Thank you so much. We've gotten a number of questions about how people can actually go see the exhibit, where it is. So can you just tell us a little bit about that to get started?
Yeah. Yes. All right. So beginning on Saturday, February 13th, you can go to the Presbytere, and you can go see the exhibit. And please support all of our amazing, amazing participants, the photographers, the maskers. There'll just be so many opportunities throughout the exhibit to hear from them. We're going to have a lot of virtual programming, and when weather and COVID permit, we'll be able to do things back in person.
Awesome. So the museum is open from Tuesdays to Saturday, 9 to 4. You do need tickets for entry here in New Orleans, and note that it will be closed on Carnival Day on Tuesday. So you might want to plan for that. So we had a couple different questions about the content of your talk. Has there been any complaints or dialogue from Native Americans or other indigenous populations about the cultural appropriations?
Okay, well, that's an assumption in there that it's a cultural appropriation. Yes. There, it's not just one thing, it's many things. For one thing, there are people who actually have Indian heritage, Black people who have Indian heritage and know that Indian heritage and mask. And so that wouldn't necessarily be appropriation. There are also other tribes of Indians who are connected with different Mardi Gras Indians. And so they, like Victor Harris, Chief Harris, has made trips to different reservations. The big thing is that some of the Indians thought that Mardi Gras Indians were making fun of them, and that's not what was going on. I think there are a couple of things. One, Indians were the only visible popular cultural elements who were fighting white people, during Jim Crow. On television, the cowboys always won, but the Indians were always putting up a resistance. And so, that's powerful to an oppressed people, to watch people, say, you're not going to take our land. I mean, the enslaved couldn't say that. They were ripped from their country. They had no land. So to be able to see another group of people so steadfastly defending themselves from being stolen from, that was powerful. And if you assume that identity, which was an identity that would not get you killed on Mardi Gras Day, because if you came out as an African, people wouldn't even know what to do with that. We hadn't even gotten that level of consciousness yet. So you could come out as an Indian, to say, screw you white people, and still be alive the next day, to tell about it. So that's a different way to look at it. There's also the aspect of spirituality. There's Floyd Track in the show, who very much tells a story from his own way of looking at the African American dilemma through images of Native Americans and their stories and lore of the transformation of people, the fluidity of the human body with the animal. And so it's a complicated relationship. So I wouldn't just say, oh, look at these Black people, they don't know what they're doing, they're just appropriating from Indians. That is not what's happening, because Black people had been wearing feathers in Africa, in Congo. They wore feathers and they beaded, and Yoruba people have this long history of a beading tradition. It's not like you just forget things when you leave. Like that would be like you going someplace today and forgetting, and like not having any memory of the things that you know. And so I take issue with that idea of appropriation. I think it's too simplistic.
We had a question about where you see Black masking traditions going in the future. This person said they love the examples of modern interpretations, but wondered how you think this will evolve, particularly in light of the massive generational change happening today.
Well, there are a lot of children who are still involved in these traditions. And so, the young people are going to, young people made that tradition. Young people, they were young when they were masking as baby dolls in 1920, and young, when they were parading around as, Black Indians. So culture is young people's innovation. And so our young people are already innovating. You have Taj Williams, a Tulane student, who is innovating that couture in ways that are incredible. So I don't see it as massive generational change. I think what happens in these traditions is that the children have a lot of time with the adults, because these things take so long to make. And so you're going to sit there, and kids are going to be beating, and they're going to be at home with their parents. So it is a way of solidifying relationships. There are 42 Black masking tribes, for example. And when Jelly Roll Morton, Jelly Roll, he said that when he was small, there were like 4 or 5 groups, and that was, in the 20s. So today there are 42. And that's just the Indians. Don't account for everybody else, Black people who are out there creating, maintaining, manifesting, demonstrating culture.
Well, it's great that these traditions are living on through the generation, but I think there's a lot of concern about how COVID is going to impact some of these traditions and practices. How do you think Mardi Gras is going to look different for the tribes this year?
Well, nobody's coming out this year. The mayor today in her press conference, was thanking the big chiefs, for encouraging everybody to not mask. So they won't mask this year. They're all planning a big, big for 2022. We're Americans, we're optimistic. So so nothing is happening this year.
Okay. Somebody had a question about the TV show Treme. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's a portrayal of the Mardi Gras Indians. Have you seen it? And do you have any thoughts on that you would want to share?
No, because this show is really focused on people who are really making the culture. Not people making movies about the culture, not people pretending to be in the culture, but these are the actual people who are making this culture from which Hollywood and everybody else can, appropriate it. So no, I want to stay focused on all the people in this show, who are so many, and are just brilliant.
Well, let's talk about your process a little bit. We're sort of interested in hearing about your experience curating the exhibit, and how it was similar or different from your teaching and other research that you do.
Yes, well, I had been seeing people who were in these different traditions, and I began by interviewing them, asking them about spirituality, because a lot of people will say that, when Black people will say that, it's a spiritual thing, but it wasn't really, you couldn't go anywhere and really read, where is it, what are they meaning by, by spirituality? And so I wanted to get everybody, because this is such a unique an individualistic process, that people say the spirit overtakes each and every one of them. So I wanted to do research. Teaching, you usually teach other people's research. And in your own research, you can actually create different ways of seeing things. And that's what I am hoping occurs with this. I hope that people have a different way of experiencing what people are doing, that they would never have access to on a Mardi Gras day. So for the other thing that's happening now is that a lot of people are interested in interviewing these groups where they had been shunned before. They were really shunned. Now they've come to serve as, an important place in the iconic landscape of New Orleans, but that wasn't always so. So, going to people, asking them, to give something of themselves so that people can have a better understanding of these traditions. That's that's the difference. The one-on-one with people in their own homes, in their intimate spaces, they allow you to come in and to be with them. I'm a student when I'm with them. I'm not the teacher.
One last question before we wrap up, and I'm going to ask this because I already know the answer to it, and I want you to be able to share with everybody. So I know the exhibit is running here in New Orleans through the fall. What is going to happen to all this amazing content as the exhibition closes here in New Orleans?
Okay, well, I showed you some of the items of loan from the Quai Branly Museum in Paris, which is a world-renowned museum. This exhibit will become part of their exhibit on New Orleans Indians, hopefully opening in fall 2022. So the people of Paris will be able to go and see this exhibit in its entirety. The whole show is going to Paris. As well as they will have additional objects that they will be showing because it's going to be a really huge show at the Branly.
That is so
and
exciting.
It will live online. And it will live online.
So exciting. It'll live online. That is so exciting. We're hoping that we'll see some of our Tulanian friends in Paris to celebrate your success there. Dr. Kim-Vaz-Deville, thank you so much for your time today. I'm glad everybody enjoyed this. What a great kickoff to our Mardi Gras series. And thanks to everybody for joining us tonight. And you can see us next week on Lundi Gras, Monday night. I'm talking about the economic impact of Mardi Gras on the city of New Orleans. So we hope you'll join us then. Thanks and have a great night.
Thank you.